2 years have passed since I pretended to be broke, and I'm sitting in the same chair where this story began, though now it's in a different apartment, surrounded by different people, in a completely different life. The foundation Danny runs has grown beyond anything I'd originally envisioned. We're now operating in 3 states, we've helped over 1,000 families, and we've been recognized by several national organizations for our innovative approach to poverty assistance. But more than the numbers, I'm proud of the culture Danny has built. Every person who works for the foundation understands that our job is to restore dignity, not just provide money. Danny himself has become something of an expert in family support services. He's been invited to speak at conferences, consulted on policy recommendations, and even interviewed by major news outlets about effective approaches to helping working families. Watching him grow into this role has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. Rosa graduated from her nurse practitioner program with honors and now runs a clinic that provides healthcare services to low-income families. She still insists on cooking for me at least once a month, claiming I get too thin when left to my own devices. Their children are both thriving. Miguel is doing graduate work in social policy, and Sophia is in her 3rd year of medical school. The family that had shown me kindness when they thought I had nothing is now in a position to show kindness to countless others. The ripple effects of authenticity keep expanding outward. My relationship with my parents has stabilized into something healthier than it was before, though it required months of difficult conversations and boundary setting. They've made genuine efforts to be more supportive and less judgmental, and I've learned to appreciate their attempts at growth while maintaining realistic expectations about human nature. But perhaps the most significant change is in how I navigate new relationships. I'm much better now at recognizing authentic people versus those who are performing authenticity for an audience. I've started dating again, though very carefully. I met someone through the foundation, a teacher named David who volunteers with our educational support programs. He's known about my wealth from the beginning, but I've watched him interact with everyone from Danny to the families we serve to the wealthy donors who support our work. He treats everyone with the same respect and kindness, regardless of their circumstances. More importantly, when I told him the story of my test, his reaction was telling. "That must have been incredibly painful," he said, "but also necessary. I can't imagine discovering that people you loved had such conditional feelings toward you." He didn't judge me for testing people or call me manipulative for lying about my financial situation. He understood that sometimes protecting yourself requires methods that seem harsh to people who have never been targeted for their wealth. I've also built new friendships, but slowly and carefully. I pay attention to how potential friends treat service workers, how they react to other people's success, how they behave when they think no one important is watching. The lessons Danny taught me about recognizing character have become second nature. Some people might think I've become cynical, but I prefer to think I've become wise. I still believe in human goodness. Danny and Rosa proved that authentic kindness exists. I just no longer assume that everyone who claims to care about me actually does. The irony is that having $2.3 billion has made me more selective about relationships, not less. When you know that your wealth makes you a target, you become very protective of your emotional space. Every new person in my life has to earn their place there through consistent demonstration of genuine character. But here's what I've learned about wealth and relationships. Money doesn't change people, it reveals them. Marcus was always someone who would abandon a partner during difficult times. My money just delayed that revelation. Sarah was always someone who prioritized her own advantage over family loyalty. My success just masked that tendency. My fair-weather friends were always shallow and opportunistic. My lifestyle just provided them with opportunities to hide those qualities. The test didn't create these character flaws. It simply created circumstances where they became visible. Great-aunt Linda's inheritance came with the responsibility to use it wisely, and I believe I have. The foundation has changed hundreds of lives for the better. I've used my resources to reward genuine kindness and to create opportunities for people who deserve them. I've learned to recognize authentic relationships and to protect myself from exploitative ones. But the most important thing I've learned is this: loyalty isn't about what people say or how they act when times are good. Loyalty is about what people do when they think you have nothing left to offer them. When I pretended to be broke, most people in my life saw an opportunity to benefit themselves at my expense. They calculated what they could gain from my supposed downfall. Marcus escaped a relationship that was no longer advantageous. Sarah positioned herself as the more successful sister. My friends felt superior by comparison to my failures. Only Danny saw an opportunity to help. Only Rosa saw someone who needed care. Only their family saw a person worth including, regardless of what I could give them in return. The test revealed that most of my relationships were transactional, but it also revealed that transformational relationships do exist. The difference is profound and life-changing. I think about my great-aunt Linda often, wondering if she'd approve of how I've used her legacy. I believe she would. She wanted her wealth to go to someone who understood both its power and its responsibility. She wanted someone who could recognize authentic character and reward it appropriately. The foundation will continue growing, helping more families, creating more opportunities for people who demonstrate the kind of character that deserves support. Danny will continue leading it with the same wisdom and compassion he showed me during my darkest pretend hour. And I'll continue building a life surrounded by people who love me for who I am, not for what I can provide them. Some nights I still think about Marcus, Sarah, and the friends I lost during this process. I wonder if they ever reflect on their behavior during my supposed crisis. I wonder if they ever consider what they lost when they chose their own immediate benefit over loyalty to someone they claimed to love. But mostly, I think about Danny knocking on my door that night, offering help to someone he thought had nothing to give him in return. I think about Rosa cooking for me, including me and her family, treating me with kindness when she thought I was at my lowest point. That's the kind of person I want to be. That's the kind of people I want in my life. And that's the legacy I want to leave with Great-Aunt Linda's money, not just wealth, but wisdom about what really matters in human relationships. The test is over, but the lessons continue every day. In every new person I meet, every relationship I consider building, every decision about who deserves my trust and who doesn't. I pretended to be broke, and only one person knocked on my door. But that one person led me to understand the difference between conditional love and unconditional loyalty. And that understanding has been worth more than any inheritance. Rate this story 0-10 and let me know in the comments, what's the most important lesson you think I learned? Would you have done anything differently? I pretended to be broke. Only one person knocked on my door. I'm standing in my empty penthouse apartment, watching my sister pack the last of my designer handbags into garbage bags, while my fiancé scrolls through his phone, completely unbothered by my supposed financial ruin. The irony isn't lost on me. I've spent the last month pretending to be broke, and now I'm watching these people I thought loved me strip my life bare like vultures. Sarah, are you sure you can't keep just one Hermes bag? I ask, my voice deliberately shaky. It was a gift from Mom. My sister doesn't even look up from where she's shoving my $3,000 purse into a trash bag. Emma, you need to face reality. These need to be sold. We can't all live in fairy tales forever. My fiancé Marcus finally glances up from his phone. Babe, Sarah's right. You've got to be practical now. Besides, it's not like you'll be going anywhere that requires a designer bag anytime soon. They both laugh, actually laugh, at my supposed misfortune. And in this moment, I realize that my little test has revealed more than I ever wanted to know about the people closest to me. But here's what they don't know. I'm not broke. Not even close. In fact, I'm about to inherit more money than they could spend in several lifetimes. And this charade, it's about to end very differently than they expect. Comment below, what would you do if you discovered the people closest to you only cared about your money? My name is Emma Chen, and until 6 weeks ago, I thought I had the perfect life. At 31, I was living in Manhattan's Upper East Side, working as a marketing executive for a luxury fashion brand, engaged to Marcus Reynolds, a successful investment banker who looked good on paper and even better in person. My sister Sarah was my best friend, or so I thought. We'd grown up together in a modest middle-class home in Connecticut, but we'd both done well for ourselves in the city. The thing about growing up middle class is that you learn to appreciate what you have, but you also develop this burning desire to prove yourself. Sarah and I had always been competitive, but in a healthy way, pushing each other to succeed. She became a real estate agent in Brooklyn, specializing in high-end properties, while I climbed the corporate ladder in fashion marketing. We'd meet for brunch every Sunday, comparing notes on our latest achievements and romantic disasters. Marcus came into my life 2 years ago at a charity gala. He was everything I thought I wanted: tall, handsome, successful, and ambitious. He had this confidence that drew people to him, and I felt special being chosen by someone like him. Our engagement 6 months ago felt like the natural progression of a perfect relationship. But then, 3 months ago, everything changed when I got a call from a lawyer I'd never heard of. "Ms. Chen, I'm calling regarding your great-aunt Linda Zhao's estate." I barely remembered great-aunt Linda. She was my grandmother's sister who had moved to Hong Kong decades ago. We'd exchanged Christmas cards, and I'd seen her maybe 5 times in my entire life. "I'm sorry, but I think you have the wrong person," I said, juggling my phone while reviewing marketing campaigns. "No mistake, Ms. Chen. Your great-aunt passed away last month, and she's named you as the primary beneficiary of her estate. Could you come in next week to discuss the details?" I almost dropped my phone. "I'm sorry, what?" That's how I learned that great-aunt Linda had been quietly building a business empire in Hong Kong and mainland China. She'd started with a small import-export business in the 1970s and had grown it into a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. She'd never married, never had children, and apparently she'd been watching me from afar. The lawyer, Mr. Patterson, explained that she'd been impressed by my work ethic and business acumen. She'd somehow been following my career, reading my marketing case studies that had been published in industry journals, even tracking my social media presence to see how I handled success and relationships. She was very particular about finding someone who understood both ambition and loyalty, Mr. Patterson explained. She wanted her heir to be someone who had earned their own success, but would also honor her legacy responsibly. The inheritance was staggering: $2.3 billion, split between cash, investments, and business holdings. But there was a catch. I had to prove myself worthy over a 6-month period. The will contained specific provisions about demonstrating character, making ethical business decisions, and showing that I could handle wealth responsibly. She was very concerned about people who might try to take advantage of you once your inheritance becomes public, Mr. Patterson said. She actually recommended a period of discretion to evaluate the relationships in your life. That's when the idea started forming. What if I tested the people around me? What if I pretended to lose everything and see who really cared about me versus who just cared about my lifestyle and potential wealth? At first, I dismissed the thought. These were people I loved and trusted. Marcus was successful in his own right. He didn't need my money. Sarah was my sister. Blood was thicker than water. My close friends had been with me through ups and downs before I'd achieved my current level of success. But great-aunt Linda's words, relayed through her lawyer, kept echoing in my mind. Wealth reveals character, both in those who have it and those who surround them. So 6 weeks ago, I made a decision that would change everything. I started planning my fake financial downfall. The plan had to be believable, so I started small. I began complaining about work stress, mentioning budget cuts at my company, expressing concern about the economy. I stopped suggesting expensive restaurants for dates with Marcus and started mentioning how I needed to watch my spending. "Everything okay, babe?" Marcus asked one evening, as I suggested we stay in instead of going to our usual $200 per person sushi place. "Yeah, just being more mindful about money," I said, watching his reaction carefully. "Work's been stressful. There are rumors about layoffs." He nodded sympathetically, but I caught him checking his phone more frequently during dinner that night. The next phase was more dramatic. I told everyone that my company had gone through massive layoffs and I'd been let go. The story was that the fashion industry was struggling and my marketing department had been eliminated entirely. Sarah's reaction was the first red flag. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry," she said when I called her, but her tone was more annoyed than sympathetic. "What are you going to do about your apartment? That rent is insane." "I'm hoping to find something soon," I said. "Maybe you could help me look for something more affordable." There was a long pause. Emma, I work with high-end properties. I don't really handle budget apartments, but I'm sure you'll figure something out. Marcus's reaction was even worse. When I told him I'd been laid off, he immediately started talking about how we might need to scale back our wedding plans. Maybe we should postpone, he suggested, not even pretending to be supportive, until you get back on your feet financially. I thought we were a team, I said, testing him. Isn't this when couples support each other? He shifted uncomfortably. Of course, babe, but let's be realistic. Planning a wedding is expensive, and if you're unemployed. I watched the man I'd planned to marry calculate the cost of loving me in real time. It was devastating and enlightening simultaneously. But the real betrayal came when I escalated to phase 3, complete financial ruin. I told everyone that not only had I been laid off, but I'd also discovered that my financial advisor had embezzled most of my savings. I was going to lose my apartment, my car, everything. I even created fake legal documents to make the story more believable. That's when people's true colors really showed. Marcus was the first to distance himself. Emma, I think we need to take a break, he said during what I thought would be a supportive dinner. This is a lot to process, and I need some space to think about our future. Our future, I repeated, stunned by his coldness. I mean, let's be honest. This changes things. I can't be expected to financially support both of us while you figure out your life. Sarah was almost worse. She offered to let me temporarily stay in her spare room, but made it clear it would come with rules and limitations. You'll need to help with groceries and utilities, she said, as if she were doing me the greatest favor in the world. And I hope you understand that this can only be short-term. I have my own life to think about. My friend group started treating me like I had a contagious disease. Suddenly, I wasn't invited to birthday dinners or weekend trips. When I did see them, they spoke to me with that patronizing tone people use when they feel superior. Don't worry, Em, my friend Jessica said with fake sweetness. Everyone goes through rough patches. You'll bounce back, eventually. The worst part was watching them discuss my situation behind my back. I overheard conversations about how they'd always known I was living beyond my means and how my lifestyle was unsustainable. But the moment that truly broke my heart was when I asked Marcus if he could lend me money for groceries. Emma, I can't keep bailing you out, he said, not even looking up from his laptop. Maybe this is a wake-up call. Maybe you need to learn to be more responsible with money. This from the man who had never paid for a single date, because I'd always insisted on covering expensive restaurants and activities. This from the man who had been perfectly happy to let me pay for our vacation to the Maldives just 4 months earlier. I realized then that I wasn't grieving the loss of my money. I was grieving the loss of people I'd thought loved me unconditionally. What would you do in this situation? Comment below. Have you ever had people show their true colors when you needed them most? As my fake financial crisis deepened, I watched my entire social circle reorganize itself around my supposed poverty. It was like watching a nature documentary about pack animals abandoning a wounded member. The first major test came when I asked to borrow Marcus's car because I'd supposedly had to sell mine. We'd been together for 2 years, engaged for 6 months, and he'd driven my BMW more times than I could count. I need my car, Emma, he said, not even pretending to consider it. I can't be without transportation because of your financial problems. I'm just asking to borrow it for a job interview, I said, making my voice as small and desperate as possible. It's across town, and I can't afford an Uber. He sighed dramatically, like I was asking him to donate a kidney. Fine, but just this once, and you need to fill up the tank. I watched him calculate the cost of gasoline in his head, weighing it against the inconvenience of helping his supposedly broke fiancé get to a job interview. The man I'd thought I'd spend my life with was now rationing kindness like it was a scarce resource. My friend circle's response was even more telling. Jessica, who had borrowed my designer dresses for countless events, suddenly couldn't remember ever having them when I mentioned needing to sell some clothes. Oh, those old things, she said with fake innocence. I thought you'd given them to me. I mean, you said I looked better in them than you did. I'd never said any such thing, and we both knew it. My friend Rachel, who had crashed at my apartment for 3 weeks when she'd broken up with her boyfriend last year, suddenly became very busy whenever I suggested getting together. "I'm so swamped with work," she'd say, then post Instagram stories of herself at expensive brunches and shopping trips. Even my coworkers from my previous job, people I'd considered friends, started treating me like a cautionary tale. When I ran into my former colleague David at a coffee shop, he actually backed away when he saw me approaching. "Emma, wow, you look different," he said, eyeing my deliberately disheveled appearance. I'd started dressing down to sell the story of my financial ruin. "Just going through a rough patch," I said, testing him. "How's work? I heard they might be hiring again soon." David's face immediately closed off. "Yeah, well, you know how it is. Very competitive market, lots of qualified candidates." He glanced at his expensive watch. "I should really get going. Good luck with everything." He practically ran away from me, like financial failure was contagious. But the most painful test was with my family. My parents lived in Connecticut and had always been proud of both Sarah and me for our success in the city. When I called to tell them about my supposed financial collapse, their reaction revealed everything I'd never wanted to see. "Emma, honey, we're so sorry this happened to you," my mother said, but her voice carried disappointment rather than sympathy. "Maybe this is a sign that you should come home and find something more stable." "More stable?" I asked. "Well, maybe all that high-flying lifestyle wasn't as secure as it seemed," my father chimed in from the background. "Sarah always said you were taking too many risks." Sarah always said. My sister had been discussing my finances with our parents, framing herself as the responsible one and me as the reckless spendthrift. When I confronted Sarah about this, her response was devastating in its casual cruelty. "Emma, don't be dramatic. I was just being realistic about your situation. Mom and Dad needed to know what was happening." What was happening was that I needed support from my family. Sarah rolled her eyes. "You need to stop expecting everyone to fix your problems. This is what happens when you live beyond your means." I never lived beyond my means. I was earning good money. "Were you, though? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you were just really good at spending money you didn't actually have." The gaslighting was breathtaking. Sarah was rewriting history in real time, making my success seem like an illusion and my current struggles seem inevitable. But then came the call that revealed the true depth of the betrayal. Marcus called me on a Tuesday evening, his voice casual and businesslike. "Emma, I've been thinking about our situation, and I think we need to make some decisions." "What kind of decisions?" "Well, I can't keep being associated with all this financial drama. It's affecting my reputation at work. People are starting to ask questions about why I'm engaged to someone who's in your situation." I felt my heart stop. My situation. You know what I mean. The bankruptcy, the legal issues, the instability. It doesn't look good for someone in my position. "Your position?" "I'm being considered for a promotion to senior partner. I can't have personal drama affecting my professional prospects." And there it was. The man I'd planned to marry was more concerned about his career prospects than about supporting me through what he believed was the worst period of my life. "So what are you saying?" I asked, though I already knew. "I think we should call off the engagement, at least temporarily, until you get your life sorted out." He said it like he was doing me a favor, like breaking up with me during my darkest hour was actually an act of kindness. "And what about the apartment?" I asked. "We'd been living together in my place." "Well, obviously I can't stay there if you're losing it. I've already found a new place in Midtown, closer to work." Already found a new place. He'd been planning this conversation, preparing for my abandonment while pretending to support me. But the final blow came from Sarah. 2 days after Marcus broke up with me, she called with news that made everything else pale in comparison. "Emma, I've been thinking about Mom and Dad's situation," she said without preamble. "What situation?" "Well, they're not getting any younger, and their retirement savings aren't what they should be. I think they need more support from us." "Okay, what are you thinking?" "Well, obviously you can't contribute right now, So I've been talking to them about maybe taking over your usual contributions. You know, for holidays, birthdays, helping with their mortgage. I'd been helping my parents financially for years, not because they needed it, but because I wanted to give back to them for all they'd done for me. It was usually about $20,000 a year in various gifts and support. Sarah, that's very generous of you, but I've also been thinking about Mom's jewelry. You know, the pieces she was planning to leave to both of us. Given your situation, maybe it would be better if I took custody of them now, for safekeeping. My blood ran cold. Safekeeping. Well, if you're facing bankruptcy and legal issues, those pieces might be seized as assets. But if they're with me, they'll be protected. She was trying to convince our parents to change their will. My sister was using my fake financial crisis as an opportunity to cut me out of our family inheritance. Sarah, those pieces have sentimental value. Mom always said, Emma, sentiment is a luxury you can't afford right now. Be practical. The worst part was that she said it with such false concern, like she was doing me a favor by stealing my inheritance. That night, I sat in my empty apartment, empty because I'd let Marcus and Sarah take whatever they wanted while I pretended to be desperate, and realized that my little test had revealed something truly horrifying. The people I'd loved most in the world hadn't just failed to support me in my time of need. They'd actively taken advantage of what they believed was my vulnerability to better their own positions. Marcus had used my supposed financial crisis as an excuse to end a relationship he'd apparently grown tired of. Sarah had used it as an opportunity to position herself as the more successful sister and potentially steal my inheritance. My friends had used it to feel better about their own lives and to distance themselves from anything that might tarnish their social status. But in all this darkness, there was one light I hadn't expected. Comment below, have you ever discovered someone's true character during a crisis? How did it change your relationship with them? While everyone else in my life was busy running away or taking advantage of my supposed misfortune, there was one person who surprised me completely. Danny Martinez, the building's night doorman. I'd always been polite to Danny, as I was to all the building staff, but we'd never had more than brief conversations about the weather or weekend plans. He was probably in his early 40s, had worked in the building for about 5 years, and had this quiet, steady presence that made everyone feel safe. 3 weeks into my fake financial crisis, when the word had gotten around the building that I was supposedly losing my apartment, Danny did something that shocked me. He knocked on my door at 11 p.m. on a Thursday night. Ms. Chen, I hope I'm not disturbing you, he said when I opened the door, looking genuinely concerned. I heard about your situation, and I wanted to check if you were okay. I was so surprised that someone had actually bothered to check on me that I almost broke character. Oh, Danny, thank you, I'm managing. He looked uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot in the hallway. I know this might be inappropriate, but I wanted you to know that if you need help with anything, groceries, moving boxes, whatever, I'm happy to help on my days off. No charge. I stared at this man who barely knew me, offering his free time to help someone he thought was in trouble. That's incredibly kind of you, but I couldn't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm offering. His voice was firm but gentle. I've seen how some people in this building treat the staff when they think no one's looking. You've never been like that. You see people as people, not just as services. That matters. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, the first genuine tears I'd shed throughout this entire charade. Here was someone who was offering help based not on what I could do for him, but on how I'd treated him when I had everything. I appreciate that more than you know, I managed to say. There's something else, Danny said, reaching into his jacket pocket. I know you've been having trouble with transportation since you had to sell your car. I've got an old Honda that's just sitting in my garage. It's not fancy, but it runs well. You can use it as long as you need to. He held out a set of keys, and I was so overwhelmed that I couldn't speak for a moment. Danny, I can't possibly accept. Yes, you can, he said simply. Sometimes life hits us hard and we need help getting back up. There's no shame in that. This man, who made a fraction of what Marcus made in a year, was offering me his car. Meanwhile, my wealthy fiancé had begrudged me borrowing his BMW for a single afternoon. Over the next few weeks, Danny continued to check on me, not in an intrusive way, but with genuine care. He'd offer to carry my groceries up from the lobby. He'd save me packages when I supposedly couldn't afford delivery fees. He'd even bring me leftover food from his wife's cooking, claiming she'd made too much. "Rosa always cooks like we're feeding an army," he'd say with a warm smile. "She'd be offended if you didn't take some." I learned that Danny had 2 kids in college and had been working nights at the building to put them through school, while his wife Rosa worked days as a hospital aide. They were barely making ends meet, yet they were consistently looking for ways to help me. One evening, Danny knocked on my door with a serious expression. "Ms. Chen, I hope you don't mind me asking, but are you eating enough? You look like you've lost weight." I had lost weight, partly from the stress of watching my relationships crumble, partly from skipping meals to maintain the appearance of someone struggling financially. "I'm fine," I said automatically. Danny studied my face with the kind of attention that comes from caring about someone's well-being. "My Rosa, she's been worried about you. She sees you sometimes when she's coming home from her shift, and she says you look too thin." "You've been talking about me." "Only because we're concerned," he said quickly. "Look, I know this might sound forward, but Rosa wants to invite you for dinner on Sunday. She's making her famous puzzle, and she always makes enough to feed half the neighborhood." I was so moved by the invitation that I almost started crying again. When was the last time someone had invited me somewhere just because they cared about my well-being, not because they wanted something from me? "I don't want to impose." "You wouldn't be imposing. Rosa specifically asked me to invite you. She says anyone who's as kind as you are deserves to have people looking out for them." That Sunday dinner changed everything for me. Danny and Rosa lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, and it was filled with warmth and laughter, in a way my expensive penthouse had never been. Their kids, Miguel and Sophia, were home from college for the weekend, and they included me in their conversations like I was family. Rosa had indeed made enough puzzle to feed an army, and she kept ladling more into my bowl every time I took a bite. "You're too skinny," she said with maternal authority. "In this house, we don't let anyone leave hungry." During dinner, I learned that Danny had grown up poor in the South Bronx and had worked multiple jobs to support his family. Rosa had immigrated from El Salvador as a teenager and had put herself through nursing school while raising 2 kids. "We know what it's like to struggle," Rosa said simply when I thanked them for their kindness. "When someone is drowning, you don't ask for their resume before you throw them a rope." After dinner, Danny pulled me aside while Rosa was packing up leftover food for me to take home. "Ms. Chen, I hope this isn't out of line, but I wanted to tell you something." "What is it?" "I've worked in that building for 5 years, and I've seen how people treat each other when times get tough. I've watched relationships fall apart the moment someone faces real problems." His voice was gentle but serious. "The people who disappeared from your life when you needed them, they were never really your people to begin with." His words hit me like a physical blow, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. Real people, people worth having in your life, they don't love you for what you can give them. They love you for who you are. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I don't know what your situation is going to look like going forward, but I want you to know that you have friends now. Real friends." As I sat in their living room, surrounded by the warmth of a family that had embraced me without knowing anything about my background or potential, I realized that my great Aunt Linda's test had revealed something I'd never expected to find. True loyalty wasn't about who could afford to help me. It was about who chose to help me when they had every excuse not to. Danny and Rosa didn't have money to lend me, but they gave me something far more valuable: proof that genuine kindness still existed in the world. What would you do? Comment below. Have you ever been surprised by who stood by you during tough times? After 2 months of living this lie, watching my supposed loved ones reveal their true characters while experiencing genuine kindness from unexpected sources, I decided it was time to end the charade. The final test results were clear. I now knew exactly who deserved to be in my life when the truth came out. The inheritance had been finalized. Mr. Patterson had called to confirm that I'd passed Great Aunt Linda's character evaluation with flying colors, particularly noting my discretion and the way I'd handled relationships during the testing period. Your great aunt would be very proud, he said. You've shown remarkable restraint and wisdom. The funds will be transferred to your accounts by the end of the week. It was time for the revelation, and I knew exactly how I wanted to do it. First, I needed to set the stage. I arranged to meet with Marcus at our old favorite restaurant, the expensive sushi place we'd stopped going to when I'd supposedly become broke. I told him I had important news about my financial situation. He arrived looking uncomfortable and slightly annoyed, clearly expecting me to ask him for money or beg him to take me back. Emma, if this is about getting back together, I need to be honest with you. I've been seeing someone else, he said before even sitting down. I felt a flash of anger, but it was quickly replaced by something else: relief. This man had just confirmed that he was exactly who I'd discovered him to be during my test. Actually, Marcus, I wanted to talk to you about my financial advisor situation, I said calmly. He sighed dramatically. I told you I can't lend you money. My new place is expensive and… I'm not asking for money, I interrupted. I wanted to let you know that the case against my financial advisor has been resolved. His expression shifted slightly. Oh, did you get any of your money back? As a matter of fact, I did. I paused, watching his face carefully. All of it, plus damages, plus interest. It turns out he hadn't actually stolen anything. It was all a misunderstanding with some overseas accounts that had been frozen due to a clerical error. Marcus's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, hope, calculation. So you're saying you're not broke anymore? I'm saying I was never broke, Marcus. In fact, I've just inherited more money than you'll make in several lifetimes. I pulled out my phone and showed him the bank statement I'd received that morning. His eyes widened as he processed the number: $2.3 billion. What the hell, Emma? You've been lying to me for 2 months. I've been testing you, I said simply, and you failed spectacularly. His face cycled through shock, anger, and then, predictably, desperation. Emma, wait, I think there's been a misunderstanding. When I said we should take a break, I didn't mean permanently. I was just trying to give you space to figure things out. Space, you moved out of my apartment and started dating someone else. I was confused. I was trying to protect both of us from making emotional decisions during a crisis. The lies came so easily to him, and I could see him mentally calculating how to get back into my good graces and my bank account. Marcus, when I supposedly had nothing, you couldn't get away from me fast enough. When I asked to borrow your car, you made me feel like I was asking for your kidney. When I needed emotional support, you told me you couldn't be associated with my financial drama. I was scared, Emma. I didn't know how to handle the situation. But Danny, our building's doorman, knew exactly how to handle it. He offered me his car, his wife cooked for me, they invited me into their home. They make in a year what you spend on clothes, but they never hesitated to help. Marcus's face was getting red now. You're comparing me to the doorman. Yes, and he's a much better man than you'll ever be. I stood up to leave, but Marcus grabbed my arm. Emma, please, we can work this out, I love you. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back at his face. No, Marcus, you love the idea of being with someone wealthy. You never loved me. I pulled my arm free and walked out, leaving him sitting there with the check. Next was Sarah. I arranged to meet her at her apartment, supposedly to collect the last of my belongings that she'd been keeping safe for me. She answered the door wearing a new designer dress that I recognized. It was one of mine that she'd claimed to be storing. Emma, you look better. Are things looking up? You could say that. I walked into her apartment and immediately spotted several of my possessions displayed like they'd always belonged there. My art pieces, my jewelry, even my grandmother's china set that I'd loaned her for a dinner party. Sarah, I came to get my things back. She looked uncomfortable. Well, actually, I've grown quite attached to some of these pieces, and given your situation, I thought it might be better if I held on to them, for safekeeping. My situation has changed. Oh, did you find a job? That's great. Though I'm not sure retail or service work will pay enough for you to maintain these kinds of luxury items. I inherited $2.3 billion. The words hung in the air like a bomb had gone off. Sarah's face went completely blank. What did you just say? Our great Aunt Linda left me her entire estate, $2.3 billion. I've been wealthy this entire time, Sarah. The financial crisis was a test. A test? Her voice was barely a whisper. I wanted to see who really cared about me and who just cared about my money and status. I gestured around her apartment at my belongings. You failed. Sarah's face went through the same cycle as Marcus's, shock, then anger, then desperate calculation. Emma, that's not fair. I was trying to help you. I was protecting your things. You were stealing my things, and you tried to convince Mom and Dad to cut me out of their will. I was being practical. You were being opportunistic. When you thought I had nothing, you took everything you could get your hands on. Sarah's mask finally slipped completely. You know what, Emma? Maybe I did take advantage of the situation. But can you blame me? You've always been the golden child, always had everything come so easily. For once, I was the successful sister. For once, Mom and Dad were proud of me instead of you. There it was, the truth I'd never wanted to acknowledge. Sarah's resentment had been building for years, and my supposed downfall had given her the chance to finally be the winner in our sibling rivalry. Sarah, Bullshit, I never
Emma.
competed
You celebrated
with you.
them
I always
condescendingly.
celebrated your
Oh,
successes. Sarah's doing so well with her little real estate job. Sarah's apartment is so cute and affordable. You never saw me as an equal. I realized that Sarah had been harboring these feelings for years, and my financial crisis had simply given her permission to act on them. Even if that were true, it doesn't justify trying to steal my inheritance or taking advantage of what you thought was my lowest moment. Sarah crossed her arms defensively. So what happens now? You're going to cut me out of your life because I wasn't perfect during your fake crisis? I'm going to cut you out of my life because you showed me who you really are. And who you really are is someone who would steal from her own sister when she thought she could get away with it. I started collecting my belongings, and Sarah watched in sullen silence. You know, Emma, having all that money isn't going to change the fact that you're a manipulative liar. You lied to everyone who cared about you. The people who actually cared about me saw past the money to the person I am. You saw dollar signs. As I left Sarah's apartment with my recovered possessions, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness for the relationship I'd thought we had, relief that I finally understood what our relationship actually was. The hardest conversation was with my parents. I called them that evening and asked them to meet me for dinner the next day. They arrived at the restaurant looking concerned and slightly embarrassed, clearly expecting to have another conversation about their financially irresponsible daughter. Emma, honey, my mother started, Sarah told us you might need some help finding a more affordable place to live. Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something important. I was never in financial trouble. I explained the entire situation, the inheritance, the test, the results. They listened in stunned silence. When I finished, my father was the first to speak. Emma, are you telling us that you lied to us for 2 months? Let us worry about you, let us judge you, just to test our character. I wanted to understand who I could count on. My mother looked hurt and confused. But Emma, we're your parents. Of course we love you regardless of your financial situation. Do you, though? I asked gently. Because when you thought I was struggling, your first reaction was disappointment. You suggested I come home and find something more stable because my lifestyle was unsustainable. You listened to Sarah's version of events and decided I was the irresponsible one. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. And when Sarah suggested taking custody of Mom's jewelry for safekeeping, you were ready to consider it. We never agreed to that, my father said defensively. But you didn't shut it down either. You were willing to entertain the idea that I might lose everything in bankruptcy proceedings, so maybe it was better if Sarah had control of family heirlooms. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Emma, we were scared for you. We didn't know how to help. Danny knew how to help. Rosa knew how to help. They have a fraction of your resources, but they never hesitated to offer support. Who are Danny and Rosa? My father asked. People who proved that real love isn't conditional on success or financial stability. We sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes. Finally, my mother spoke. What do you want from us, Emma? An apology? You put us through months of worry based on a lie. I want you to understand that your reaction taught me something important about our family dynamics. When you thought I was failing, your first instinct was to blame me rather than support me. Sarah was able to convince you that I was irresponsible because you were already predisposed to believe it. My father sighed heavily. Emma, maybe we didn't handle it perfectly, but we're only human. We make mistakes. I know, and I'm not cutting you out of my life like I am Sarah and Marcus, but our relationship is going to be different now. It has to be. Different how? I need to know that you love me for who I am, not for how successful I appear to be. And I need to know that if I ever face real trouble, you'll be in my corner instead of looking for ways I brought it on myself. My parents left that dinner with a lot to think about. Our relationship would require work to rebuild, but unlike with Sarah and Marcus, I believed it was worth the effort. Comment your city. Where are you watching from? Have you ever had to rebuild trust with family members? The beauty of having $2.3 billion is that revenge doesn't have to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes the most satisfying justice is quiet, elegant, and perfectly legal. I started with Marcus. Within a week of our confrontation, I'd learned through mutual acquaintances that he was desperately trying to get back in touch with me. He'd called, texted, emailed, even shown up at my building, though Danny had very politely but firmly turned him away each time. Ms. Chen doesn't wish to be disturbed, Danny had told him with the kind of professional courtesy that somehow manages to be both polite and completely dismissive. But Marcus was persistent, especially after word of my inheritance started spreading through our social circles. He'd even had the audacity to send flowers with a note saying he'd reconsidered our relationship. So I decided to give him exactly what he deserved, a very public demonstration of how irrelevant he'd become to my life. I knew Marcus would be at the charity gala where we'd first met. He never missed an opportunity to network with wealthy donors. I decided to attend as well, but this time as a major sponsor rather than just another guest. When the event organizers learned about my willingness to make a substantial donation, I suddenly found myself at the head table, being introduced as one of the evening's most generous benefactors. Marcus's face when he saw me walk into the ballroom was priceless. He immediately started making his way toward my table, but I'd anticipated this. Danny, I said to my guest, would you like to dance? I'd invited Danny and Rosa as my guests, and they'd initially been hesitant to attend such a fancy event. But Rosa had found a beautiful dress at a consignment shop, and Danny looked distinguished in his one good suit. More importantly, they belonged there because they were good people, which was more than I could say for most of the other attendees. As Danny and I moved onto the dance floor, I saw Marcus freeze halfway across the room. The man who'd once complained about me being seen with service workers was watching me dance with the building's doorman at one of New York's most exclusive charity events. Ms. Chen, Danny said quietly as we danced, I hope you're not using Rosa and me to make a point to your ex-fiancé. I smiled at his perceptiveness. Maybe a little, but mostly I wanted to celebrate with people who actually deserve to be celebrated. You and Rosa have shown me more genuine kindness in 2 months than Marcus showed me in 2 years. Well, when you put it like that, Danny grinned, I'm happy to help you make him jealous. When the dancing ended, I returned to my table where Rosa was chatting comfortably with a tech billionaire's wife about their children's college experiences. She fit in effortlessly because class isn't about money, it's about character. Marcus finally managed to corner me near the bar. Emma, we need to talk, he said, his voice tight with frustration. No, we really don't. You can't just ignore me forever. We were together for 2 years. And in those 2 years, you never once supported me through a difficult time, because I never let you see me having one. I turned to face him fully. The moment you thought I needed you rather than the other way around, you ran. I made a mistake, people make mistakes. Marcus, what you did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. You chose to prioritize your career and your image over the person you claim to love. That's not something you accidentally do. He looked around the ballroom, clearly uncomfortable with having this conversation in public. Can we at least discuss this privately? I deserve a chance to explain. You deserve nothing from me, I said calmly. And I owe you no explanations, no second chances, no consideration whatsoever. I started to walk away, but he grabbed my arm, just like he had at the restaurant. Emma, be reasonable, we're good together, we make sense. Before I could respond, Danny appeared beside us. Is there a problem here? He asked, his voice polite but with an edge that made it clear he was prepared to handle whatever problem might exist. Marcus looked Danny up and down dismissively. This is a private conversation. Actually, I said, Danny is my guest and my friend. You, on the other hand, are neither. Marcus's face turned red. Emma, this is ridiculous. You're going to choose the doorman over me. I'm going to choose good people over shallow ones, every single time. Security was already moving toward us. High-end charity events don't tolerate disruptions, and Marcus finally seemed to realize he was making a scene. This isn't over, Emma. Yes, it is, I said simply. It's been over since the moment you showed me who you really are. Marcus stormed out, and I never saw him again. I heard through mutual friends that he tried to spread rumors about me, losing my mind, and making poor choices. But nobody was particularly interested in the bitter complaints of a man who'd obviously been dumped by a billionaire. Sarah's consequences were more subtle but equally satisfying. Word traveled fast in our family about what had happened, and the family dynamics shifted permanently in my favor. When I returned all the items she'd tried to steal, I did it through a lawyer with a detailed inventory. The legal paperwork made it clear that Sarah had taken substantial valuable property without permission, which could have been prosecuted as theft if I'd chosen to pursue it. I didn't pursue legal action, but the threat was implicit. Sarah now understood that I had resources she couldn't match and legal protections she couldn't circumvent. More importantly, I made sure our parents understood exactly what Sarah had done. I provided them with copies of our text conversations, where she discussed taking custody of family heirlooms and tried to position herself as the more responsible daughter. I had no idea Sarah was being so calculating, my mother said when she saw the evidence. The family jewelry that Sarah had tried to claim? I had it appraised and discovered it was worth substantially more than any of us had realized. I arranged for it to be properly insured and stored, and made it clear that it would eventually go to Danny and Rose's children, people who understood the value of family loyalty. Sarah tried to reconcile several times, but her apologies always came with justifications and excuses. She couldn't simply admit she'd been wrong. She had to explain why her actions had made sense at the time. The final attempt came 3 months later when she showed up at my apartment building. Danny called up to ask if I wanted to see her. Tell her I'm not available, I said. She's asking if there's a time that would work better, Danny reported. Tell her there will never be a time that works. I heard him relay the message with professional courtesy, and that was the last time Sarah tried to contact me directly. But the most satisfying justice was what happened with my former friend group. Once word got out about my inheritance, they all suddenly remembered how much they'd missed me. Jessica called first. Emma, I've been so worried about you. You disappeared and nobody knew how to reach you. You knew exactly how to reach me. You just didn't want to. That's not fair. We were giving you space to figure things out. Jessica, you literally pretended not to remember borrowing my designer dresses when I said I needed to sell them. I was confused. You were lying, and now that you know I'm wealthy again, you want to resume our friendship like nothing happened. I could hear her scrambling for the right words. Emma, friendships go through rough patches. That doesn't mean we stop caring about each other. You're right, I said, but it does mean I learned something important about the difference between real friends and social acquaintances. I hung up on her, and when she tried to call back, I blocked her number. Rachel tried a different approach. sending a long email about how she'd been going through her own difficult time during my crisis and hadn't been able to be supportive because she was dealing with personal issues. I didn't even respond. David from my old job was the most pathetic. He actually showed up at a coffee shop he knew I frequented and tried to pretend our encounter was accidental. Emma, what a coincidence. You look amazing. I heard things turned around for you. They did. That's wonderful. You know, I always believed things would work out. I was actually just thinking about you the other day, wondering how you were doing. Were you? Because when I ran into you a few months ago, you couldn't get away from me fast enough. His face flushed. I was having a bad day, work stress, you know how it is. I know exactly how it is, and I know exactly who you are. I walked away from him mid-sentence, and the look on his face was worth more than any dramatic confrontation could have been. The beautiful thing about having real wealth is that you don't need to prove anything to people who don't matter. You can simply live your life surrounded by people who deserve to be there. What would you do in this situation? Comment below, do you think I was too harsh or did they get what they deserved? While I was quietly closing doors on the people who had failed my test, I was opening much bigger doors for those who had passed it with flying colors. Danny and Rosa had no idea about the extent of my wealth for weeks after the truth came out. I'd told them my financial situation had improved, but I'd been deliberately vague about the details. They continued treating me exactly the same way they had when they thought I was broke, with warmth, respect, and genuine care. One evening in late October, I knocked on Danny's door at the end of his shift. "Ms. Chen, is everything all right?" he asked, immediately concerned. "Actually, I was hoping I could talk to you and Rosa about something important." They invited me in, and Rosa immediately started bustling around their small kitchen, preparing tea and insisting I try some of her homemade flan. "Rosa, please sit down," I said. "I have something I need to tell you both." They sat across from me at their modest dining table, looking slightly worried. "Remember when I told you my financial situation had improved?" I began. "Yes, we were so happy for you," Rosa said warmly. "We knew things would turn around." Well, I wasn't entirely honest about how much it improved. I pulled out my phone and showed them the same bank statement I'd shown Marcus and Sarah. I inherited $2.3 billion. They stared at the screen in complete silence for a long moment. Danny was the first to speak. "Emma, are you saying you're a billionaire?" "I am." Rosa's hand flew to her mouth. "Dios mío, and all this time we thought we were trying to help you with groceries and—" She looked embarrassed, but Danny reached over and took her hand. "Rosa, what we did was right regardless of Emma's financial situation," he said firmly. Then he looked at me. "Though I have to ask, why didn't you tell us sooner?" "Because I wanted to see if it would change how you treated me. And it didn't. Even now, knowing I'm wealthy, you're not asking me for anything or treating me differently." "Why would we?" Rosa asked, genuinely puzzled. "Money doesn't change who you are as a person." "You'd be surprised how many people don't understand that," I said sadly. "So what happens now?" Danny asked. "I mean, you probably don't want to stay in that building if you can afford, well, anything you want." This was my moment. "Actually, I've been thinking about making some changes, big changes, and I'd like you both to be part of them." I explained that I was planning to establish a foundation focused on supporting working families. People like them who worked multiple jobs, put their children through college, and still found ways to help their communities despite having limited resources. "I want you to run it," I told Danny. "You understand the challenges these families face because you've lived them. You have the character and judgment to make decisions about who deserves help and what kind of help would actually make a difference." Danny looked stunned. "Emma, I don't know anything about running a foundation." "You can learn. I'll make sure you get all the training and support you need. The salary would be $200,000 a year to start, plus full benefits for your whole family." Rosa gasped. Danny just stared at me. "Why?" he finally asked. "Because when I needed help, you didn't hesitate to offer it. When I was hungry, you fed me. When I needed transportation, you gave me your car. When I was lonely, you included me in your family." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. You proved that real kindness exists, and I want to build something that honors that. What about my job at the building? Danny asked. Give your notice whenever you're ready. I'll make sure you're covered financially during the transition. Rosa was crying now. Emma, this is too much, we can't accept. Yes, you can, I said, echoing Danny's words from months earlier. Sometimes life gives us opportunities to help people who deserve it. There's no shame in accepting that. But the foundation wasn't the only surprise I had for them. The next week, I asked them to meet me at an address in a nice neighborhood in Queens, not far from where they currently lived, but in a much better area with excellent schools. They arrived to find me standing in front of a beautiful 4-bedroom house with a small yard and a 2-car garage. Emma, why are we here? Rosa asked. Because this is your new house, I said, handing Danny the keys, if you want it. They both stared at me in shock. Emma, we can't possibly accept a house, Danny said, though his voice was shaky. It's not a gift, I explained. It's part of your compensation package. The foundation will own it, and you'll live there as long as you're running the organization. When you retire, it becomes yours outright. Rosa was walking around the front yard, touching the fence posts like she couldn't believe they were real. There's a home office where you can work when you need to, I continued. And the basement is finished so Miguel and Sophia will have space when they come home from college. How did you know about the basement? Danny asked suspiciously. I may have asked them what features would make the perfect family home, I admitted. Rosa came back to where we were standing, tears streaming down her face. Emma, we've lived in that apartment for 8 years. We never thought we'd be able to afford a house, especially not in a neighborhood like this. Rosa, you've earned this, you both have. But I wasn't done. I'd also set up college funds for Miguel and Sophia that would cover not just their remaining tuition, but graduate school if they chose to pursue it. And I'd arranged for Rosa to get additional nursing training that would qualify her for higher-paying positions at the hospital. I don't understand why you're doing all this, Danny said as we walked through their new home. Because you restored my faith in humanity, I said simply. When everyone else saw my supposed failure as an opportunity to benefit themselves, you saw it as an opportunity to help. That deserves to be rewarded. That evening, as we sat in their new living room, eating takeout off paper plates because their furniture hadn't been delivered yet, Miguel asked me a question that stuck with me. Ms. Chen, don't you think some of your other friends feel bad about how they treated you? Maybe they'd act differently if they had another chance. Maybe some of them do feel bad, I said thoughtfully, but feelings aren't the same as character. When people show you who they are, you should believe them. But people can change, Sophia added. Everyone deserves a second chance, right? Some people do, I agreed, but others just get better at hiding who they really are. The difference is in whether someone takes responsibility for their actions or just regrets the consequences. Danny nodded approvingly. That's wisdom right there. 3 months later, the foundation was officially launched. Danny had thrown himself into learning about nonprofit management with the same dedication he'd brought to every job he'd ever had. Rosa had enrolled in an advanced nursing program that would qualify her to become a nurse practitioner. Their kids were thriving in their new neighborhood schools, and the family had a stability and security they'd never experienced before. But the most rewarding part for me was watching Danny work with the families who applied for assistance. He approached each case with the same empathy and practical wisdom he'd shown me during my fake crisis. This family needs help with rent so they don't get evicted, he'd tell me during our weekly meetings. But they also need job training so they can increase their income long term, and the kids need tutoring support so they don't fall behind in school. He saw the whole person, the whole family, the whole situation, just like he'd seen me as more than just a wealthy tenant who'd fallen on hard times. The foundation's first year was incredibly successful. We helped over 200 families with everything from emergency, rent assistance, to small business loans, to educational support. But more than that, we helped them with dignity, treating them as people who deserved support rather than charity cases. You know what I love most about this work? Danny told me one day. We're not just giving people money, we're giving them hope. We're showing them that someone believes they're worth investing in. That's when I knew Great Aunt Linda would have been proud of how I'd used her inheritance. I wasn't just accumulating wealth, I was using it to recognize and reward the kind of character she'd valued most. Rate this part of the story 110. Have you ever been able to reward someone who showed you unexpected kindness? A year after my great test of loyalty, I found myself sitting in the office of my new penthouse apartment. Yes, I'd moved out of the building where so much drama had unfolded, reviewing the foundation's annual report with Danny. We'd helped over 400 families, funded 12 small businesses, and provided educational support to hundreds of children. But the numbers, impressive as they were, weren't what made me feel most proud. It was the thank you letters. Listen to this one, I said to Danny, reading from a letter we'd received that morning. Dear Mr. Martinez and the foundation team, 6 months ago, I thought my family was going to lose our home. My husband had been laid off, I was working 2 part-time jobs, and we were 2 months behind on our mortgage. When I called your foundation, I expected to be told there was a waiting list or that we didn't qualify for help. Instead, you not only helped us catch up on our payments, but you helped my husband get job training in a field with better opportunities. Today, he started work as a certified electrician, making more money than he ever has. But more than that, you treated us with respect and dignity when we felt like failures. You made us feel like we were worth investing in. That changed everything for us. Danny smiled as he listened, but I could see the emotion in his eyes. That never gets old, he said softly. No, it doesn't. I set the letter down and looked at him. Danny, do you ever regret leaving your job at the building? I know it was steady work, and this foundation work can be emotionally demanding. He considered the question seriously before answering. Emma, I spent 5 years watching people walk through that lobby every day. Some of them treated me like I was furniture, like I was just part of the building's amenities. Others treated me with basic politeness, but very few ever saw me as a full person with my own dreams and struggles. He paused, organizing his thoughts. Now, every day, I get to help families who are facing the same challenges Rosa and I faced for years. I get to be the person who says, yes, we can help. Yes, you matter. Yes, you deserve support. That's worth more than job security. And Rosa, how is she adjusting to everything? Danny's face lit up with pride. She's incredible. She's going to graduate from the nurse practitioner program in 3 months, and the hospital has already offered her a position that pays almost as much as both our old jobs combined. But you know what she said to me last week? What? She said that the most important thing isn't the money we're making now. It's that our kids will grow up seeing their parents help other people, knowing that success means lifting others up, not stepping on them. I felt a familiar tightness in my throat. Rosa's wisdom never stopped surprising me. Speaking of your kids, how are they doing? Miguel is thriving at Columbia. He's majoring in social work, says he wants to help run foundations like this someday. And Sophia just got into NYU's pre-med program with a full scholarship. Not our scholarship, I clarified. She earned that one on her own merit. Exactly. They're both proud that they earned their opportunities, but they also know they have a safety net if they need it. That's given them confidence to take risks to pursue their dreams. As Danny spoke about his children, I realized that this was what Great Aunt Linda had really wanted when she designed her test. She hadn't just wanted to ensure her money went to someone responsible. She'd wanted it to go to someone who understood that wealth's greatest power was its ability to create opportunities for others. But the foundation work, rewarding as it was, had also shown me something important about myself. I was good at recognizing authentic people and supporting them, but I'd been terrible at recognizing inauthentic people and protecting myself from them. Danny, can I ask you something personal? Of course. When you first met Marcus and my other friends, did you know immediately what kind of people they were? Or did it take time? Danny thought about this carefully. I had a sense, he said finally. Marcus never once acknowledged me when he came to the building. Not just as a doorman, he never even saw me as a person worth basic courtesy. Your sister was polite to me, but it was the kind of politeness that keeps people at a distance. Your friends treated me like I was part of the building's decor. Why didn't you say anything? It wasn't my place. And honestly, I hoped I was wrong about them. I've learned to recognize people who see service workers as less than human, but I always hope I'm judging too harshly. You weren't judging too harshly. No, he agreed sadly, I wasn't. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, both lost in our own thoughts. Emma, can I ask you something now? Of anything. Do you ever regret doing the test? I mean, it must have been painful to see people you loved show their true colors. I considered his question carefully. It was something I'd wondered about myself during the darker moments of the past year. I regret that it was necessary, I said finally. I regret that I was naive enough to surround myself with people who only valued me for what I could provide them, but I don't regret learning the truth about them, even though it meant losing people you thought were important to you. Danny, those relationships were built on false foundations. If I'd married Marcus without knowing who he really was, what would have happened the first time we faced real adversity together? If I'd continued trusting Sarah with family matters, how much more would she have taken advantage of my trust over the years? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. The test didn't change who those people were, I continued. It just revealed who they'd always been. I'd rather know the truth and build my life around authentic relationships than live a lie surrounded by people who only care about me conditionally. And what about your parents? How are things with them now? That was a more complicated question. Better, but different. They're making an effort to be more supportive and less judgmental, but it's been hard work for all of us. They had to confront some uncomfortable truths about how they'd been treating Sarah and me differently, and I had to forgive them for not being perfect while still maintaining boundaries about what I will and won't accept going forward. That sounds exhausting. It is sometimes, but they're trying, really trying, to do better. That's more than I can say for the people I cut out of my life entirely. Danny nodded thoughtfully. Rosa always says that forgiveness isn't about pretending someone didn't hurt you. It's about deciding whether they've earned the right to potentially hurt you again. Rosa is a wise woman. She is, and she's grateful every day for the opportunity you've given our family. We all are. I turned back to face him. Danny, you don't owe me gratitude. You've earned everything good that's happened to your family. I just had the resources to help it happen a little faster. Maybe, but I also want you to know that you've changed our lives in ways that go beyond money. You've shown us what generosity looks like when it comes from genuine care rather than obligation or guilt. You've taught us that wealth can be a tool for building people up rather than keeping them down. I felt tears starting to form in my eyes. You taught me something even more important. You taught me the difference between people who love you and people who love what you can do for them. As Danny prepared to leave for the day, I realized that this conversation had crystallized something I'd been feeling for months, but hadn't been able to articulate. The test had cost me relationships, but it had gained me something infinitely more valuable: the knowledge that the people in my life now were there for the right reasons. Marcus, Sarah, and my fair-weather friends had never really known me or loved me. They'd loved their idea of me, their projection of what I could provide them. When that projection was threatened, they'd abandon me without hesitation. But Danny, Rosa, and their family had seen me at what they believed was my lowest point and had chosen to love me anyway. They'd offered help without expecting anything in return, included me in their family without conditions, and treated me with kindness when they thought I had nothing to offer them. That evening, I called Mr. Patterson, Great-Aunt Linda's lawyer, to give him the Foundation's annual report. She would be very proud, he said, after reviewing our accomplishments. This is exactly what she hoped would happen with her legacy. Mr. Patterson, can I ask you something about my great-aunt? Of course. Did she ever test people the way I tested my relationships? There was a long pause. Ms. Chen, your great-aunt spent her entire adult life being pursued by people who wanted access to her wealth. She became very skilled at recognizing genuine character versus performed character. She didn't need to create artificial tests because life provided them naturally. What do you mean? She told me once that you learn everything you need to know about a person by watching how they treat people who can't benefit them. She said that authenticity reveals itself in small moments. How someone speaks to a waiter, how they react when they think no one important is watching, how they respond to other people's success or failure. I thought about Marcus never acknowledging Danny, about Sarah's condescending comments about my little lifestyle choices when she thought I was superior to her, about my friends' casual cruelty when they thought I was no longer useful to them. She was right, I said. She usually was. But Ms. Chen, I hope you know that your test wasn't about punishing people for failing. It was about protecting yourself from relationships that would have caused you much more pain in the long run. After I hung up with Mr. Patterson, I sat in my new apartment and reflected on everything that had changed in the past year. I'd lost people I thought I loved, but I'd gained people who actually loved me. I'd discovered painful truths about some relationships, but I'd also discovered beautiful truths about human nature. Most importantly, I'd learned to trust my own judgment about character. I'd learned to recognize the difference between people who saw me as a person and people who saw me as an opportunity. Comment below, do you think testing relationships like this is fair, or should people get the benefit of the doubt?